And we're live, day 6 of my 30-day video challenge. Yesterday we talked about time, and I got a few really good comments. And I just spoke to Brent, and he mentioned something in our conversation now and in a comment that was actually in my notes for what I wanted to talk about yesterday, but I figured it was long enough, so I left it out. And that's continuing on the theme of the way different cultures view time, kind of the importance of being on time. Living in Spain, especially in the Canary Islands in Las Palmas and Gran Canaria, it was interesting to see that people, conversations, keeping up kind of that social niceties and norms was far more important than sticking to any kind of regimented schedule. So for example, if you were to bump into grandma on the way to an appointment, your appointment was at 3 o'clock and you had just a few minutes to get there, by their standards, it would be much more important to stop, talk to grandma, and pay the respect that she deserves, and have the conversation. And then you get to your appointment and be like, hey, sorry I'm a few minutes late or an hour late. They're probably running late anyway, but I ran into my grandmother on the way here and I needed to talk to her, or something like that. Whereas in other cultures, definitely in most parts of the US, especially the East Coast and especially like New York and Washington, big busy cities, but also I would guess more like German, Northern European culture, you would respect the appointment. It would be more important to be on time for 3 o'clock, and you would tell grandma, hey, sorry grandma, I've got an appointment, I've got to run. And I guess it depends on the person, maybe they'd be offended, but I think in those cultures it's sort of more understood that if you have an appointment, you have to be there on time. Puya also had an interesting comment and touched on something that I actually had planned to talk about today, which I thought was funny. Great minds think alike. Which is the way that we perceive time and how it passes and how that changes depending on what's going on in your life. I think for a lot of us, we kind of went through university or even the high school, and as you go through school, it's like, you have that whole school year, and then you have summer, and there's you get to the next year, so you go from a freshman to a sophomore, or sophomore to a junior, and so on, and eventually graduate. And that sort of like delineates things nicely for you. So you kind of feel like you're making progress, and there's like a nice clean break from year to year. And even in between semesters in school and everything. And then at some point you graduate or you get into the real world, and that whole process just sort of goes away, and like years of your life can disappear. And I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with friends, especially when we were in our early 20s, but even past that, where it's like, man, is it December already? Where did this year go? Or, hey, remember that time we went to such and such place? I can't believe that was like 3 years ago. It feels like yesterday. And the effect is just that without any sort of like milestones to break up the time, months and years can just fly by. And it just seems almost like cliched. People talk about it, of just, oh, time's flying. I can't believe it's been so long since the last time we saw each other, or the last time we did such and such activity. And the effect is just like your life is kind of whizzing by you. And so what I wanted to actually talk about today were just kind of like 3 quick things that if you travel constantly, especially if you're like a digital nomad, and by that I mean someone who's like, probably living out of a suitcase. There's different ways to do it, but moving around often, and generally traveling like from point to point. Not I work or I live in Chicago and I go to Des Moines 3 times a month for work. Not that kind of frequent travel, but sort of like, I'm in Bangkok for a month, and then I go to Bali, and then I go to Budapest, and then I go to Berlin. When you travel like that, the way that time passes totally changes. And it was really interesting. And I've had this conversation, as I mentioned, with Brent today, with Poya, who mentioned this in a comment, and with other kind of nomads and travelers over the years, that it totally flips around. It ends up being like, oh, I'm so excited to go back to Tokyo. It feels like it's been forever. And then you look back and it's like, wait a minute, I was there 6 months ago. That was the same year. I remember I injured my knee skiing in, I think it was March of one year in India. And March is kind of like towards the end of the ski season. And then I continued traveling along and went to a whole bunch of different places. And then like later that year, by kind of like November, I went skiing again for the first time since having injured my knee and like mostly recovered from the injury at that point. It was actually in the shopping mall in Dubai where they have that indoor ski slope. So not anything serious, but it was the first time I'd put on skis since the injury. And I remember thinking like, wow, it's so weird to be, back in skis again. I wonder how it's going to feel. It's been so long, since I was injured. And then I stopped and realized like, wait a minute. It had been from March until November. That's like shorter than the normal break in between ski seasons. Like where I live, March you'd be already kind of like iffy if there's still good snow, and you're definitely not skiing by November. But just because of all the travel that I'd done in between, like it felt like, and maybe because of the injury, but it felt like it had been, years since I'd been out there. And I've seen that effect like over and over. When you travel full time, just the way time passes completely changes. That was one of the effects I think you feel traveling full time. Another mindset shift also related to time is like seasons. Seasons stop mattering, especially if you're regularly switching between hot places and cold places. Like growing up and for most of my life, like there was a clear kind of you go through the seasons and your wardrobe changes and the foods you eat change and all of that stuff. And then you become a nomad and travel full time, and it's like you have no idea anymore because it's winter and you're in Southeast Asia and it's super hot. And then, one summer you end up going to South America and everything is reversed, or Australia. So I totally lost like sense of seasons. Weather just became place dependent from week to week or month to month. The last one, the third sort of thing that changes being a digital nomad is just the way I look at buying things. You can definitely be a nomad and still have a lot of clothes or a lot of possessions, but I think there is a pretty common overlap between being a nomad and minimalism. It's partly practical, right? Like if you're traveling often, you can only fit so much stuff in your suitcase. But I think there's also like a philosophical thing there of like, having sort of a minimal set of things, or being minimalist and being a nomad are both lifestyle decisions that are kind of on top of they sort of presuppose the idea that experiences are more valuable or more important than possessions. And so with that, it used to be that I would go shopping or go to the mall or pass a store and, see something that I like, and assuming it was like a reasonable cost, buy it, right? I would just be like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that. I'll just buy it. And then after I started traveling full time, it's like I would have all this stuff in my closet and I could only fit so much in a suitcase. And even if I could fit a little bit more, there was always this like, I'm going to have to lug that stuff around. So I don't want to carry too much stuff. And it switched to being, very functional. Like I carry what I need. And so then I would pass like, a pair of pants or something like that in a store, and I would see them. And the first thought would be the same. I would look at them and be like, oh, those are pretty cool. Maybe I should. And be like, wait a minute. I already have a pair of pants. But whatever the object was. And it changed totally. And I think it's definitely nice if you to have new things, to buy different stuff, to enjoy, fashion and trends and all of that. But it is also kind of liberating just to like go out and buy one or a few of the best thing that you need, rather than this constant like disposable, like, oh, let me just get a new one. I don't even know why I'm getting it. I just saw it in a store and I impulse purchase bought it. So those are just kind of like a few of the little mindset shifts that at least happened to me, and there's a ton of other ones, but those are 3 for today. I'll be back tomorrow with more to share.